Lesson 2, Working with Media. In our previous unit, we talked about scratch volumes and private volumes. Now we're going to discuss what they mean. A scratch volume is a volume, it's going to have a label. All of our tape volumes have labels, but it will be empty or contain no valid data. It's going to change to private once it's written to, and can be used to satisfy any request for mounting a scratch volume. A private volume also contains a label, might have some valid data, is used or owned by an application, can only be used to satisfy a request for mounting a specific volume. So, scratch volumes are generally held in what we call scratch pools. You'll have multiple volumes that are labeled, empty or have no valid data, waiting to be called into action. This is rather confusing looking, but it's an actual diagram of the life cycle of a tape cartridge. We have a new tape cartridge. We label and check in the cartridge. We're going to add it to our scratch pool. When a tape is needed, one of these volumes will be called, it's selected, and written to. Once it's written to, it becomes private. If you're using co-location by node, and this has data for client node A, it will be called whenever client node A is backed up. If you're not using co-location, it could be called into action for any client node backup. Once the data has been written to the tape, and data expires on the tape or is moved off the tape, it goes into tape reclamation. This is where we have set a value, saying when a tape is 60% empty or 70% empty, whatever you set the reclamation threshold for, it starts expiring the data based on policy. That's the next unit, by the way, creating space. Then reclamation will gather all the good data, write it to a different volume, and return the now empty volume to the scratch pool. However, it's not really empty. It has no valid data, but there is expired data on it. We have something called reuse delay, and this option allows you to postpone writing on tapes that have been reclaimed for a specific number of days. For example, 3 days would cover a long weekend, say a weekend with a holiday or a vacation attached to it. This is a safety net. Yes, the data on the tape is not valid, but it could still be accessed. So do you want to overwrite it right away, or do you want to delay it for 3 days? Let's delay it, make sure we don't really need it, then add it back to either a private or a scratch pool. So that's the life cycle of a tape cartridge. As we said in the previous screen, all tape volumes are labeled. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can use the label libvol command, in which you're going to say label libvol, that's your library volume, the library name, check-in equals scratch or private, you determine. We have search equals bulk or yes. Bulk specifies that the server is going to search the library entry and exit ports for usable volumes to label. Yes specifies the server labels each volume unless the volume is already labeled. And then you have the label source. Is it barcode? Will you be prompted, or is there a volume list? Barcode is what it sounds like. If there is an actual barcode on the volume, the library would read that. Otherwise, it's going to prompt you for the name, or if you have a SCSI library, you can read a file or a list. Then we also have the auto label parameter when you define a library. In our command syntax here, define library, the library name, the type of library, and auto label equals yes. So you'd use this when you define or update a library, and it's available with all libraries except for shared libraries. What the auto label does is it's going to check in your volumes that have no label. So it will label and check in one step. Checking out volumes. You would do this if you're taking volumes off-site for safe storage, or you need to remove a volume for some other reason from your tape library. You can use a command line, or you could use the administration center. There's also ways that you can script your check-in and your check-out for your volumes, and refer to the administrator's guide for help on this. Volumes come back from off-site, or you're adding new volumes. This is how you would check them in. Check in libvol, the name of your tape library, the name of your volume, search equals no, scratch status in this case, and we could also add the check label equals barcode. Now remember, search equals yes or bulk. Those are our options. And check label can be barcode, prompt, or vol list. Occasionally you might need to audit your library. Be careful when you do this because it does take a lot of time and resources. If you need to take a tape out or move a tape in your library, which is not something you would normally do, moving tapes within the library, you'd need to run audit library. This is because you have reorganized the way things are in your library, and TSM needs to know where everything is. In this case, this scenario we're showing here, volumes 7 and 8 in slots 2 and 3 had some problem and needed to be removed manually and replaced. Then you would run the audit library command to update your library inventory. Auditing the library using the audit library command does take resources and time. So if you can avoid changing tape locations in your library, do so. The virtual tape library is becoming more and more popular. It's high performance. It does a really fast backup and restore. You can now use the define library command and specify a VTL or virtual tape library. This is a noted type of library now with TSM. So this is the end of Unit 5. You should now be able to identify device types, configure a tape library to TSM by using your manufacturer's instructions, prepare tape cartridges for use in a TSM managed library, check in and check out media in a tape library. You'll also be able to label your tapes. We don't have student exercises for this unit, so this is the end of the unit.